All right, hello. I'm Alex Marland. I am the Jaroslawski Chair in Trust and Political Leadership in the Department of Politics at Acadia University in Nova Scotia. And I'm here with Beatrice Wayne, who is the Director of Research and Policy at the Samara Centre for Democracy in Toronto. Hey, Beatrice.
Hi, happy to be here.
All right. So listen, today we're going to be talking about some themes that I think are of interest to both of us and hopefully to viewers or listeners. And they're really drawing on a couple of reports that the Samara Centre did. So one is called Party Favours, How Federal Election Candidates Are Chosen. And you can find that easily on the Samara Centre's website. And the other one is was written by Alison Lote, who was involved with the Samara Centre right in the early beginnings. And she ended up writing a piece for the Canadian Parliamentary Review that I find very useful. It's a useful, very succinct article called Member of Parliament, A Job with No Description. And so those particular readings are just be an anchor for us to have a chat and a conversation. So Beatrice, based on the research and what you're aware of, let's talk about, becoming a candidate, a party candidate in Canada. Is it easy to do? Is it tough? What are your thoughts?
It seems incredibly tough to me. And I have to say, before joining the Samara Centre for Democracy, it's not that sort of initial stage is not something I had ever given a lot of thought to as part of a critical part of the political process. But it absolutely it is. It determines who sits in the House of Commons. It is a crucial, and I think understudy first stage. And when we really look at the way that um, parties aren't required to share information about this process, it opens up a lot of questions about the opacity of it, the lack of transparency, and really creates concerns about whether we are going to be able to get a very good representation, get people who really want to run and make change in their community into Parliament as our representatives.
Yeah. So the first step, if you want to become a party, the first thing is even selecting a party is a thing, right? Because, as you know, if you are trying to get into Parliament or even a provincial legislature, if you are not affiliated with a political party, your chances of getting in are very slim. It's something like 99.9%. And I know that because I've looked at the numbers, percent of people rare to get in as an independent. So you pick a party, and of course you need your party to be relatively successful to give you that boost. But you don't just say, hey, I'm going to run for this party. Walk us through what happens when you want to get involved with a political party and be the candidate.
Well, I think being involved with the political party is one thing, being a candidate is another. And I think it's so dependent on where you are in your connections to that political party, because in many cases, it's not going to be a nomination race, right? In many cases, that EDA will actually have a candidate hand selected for them by the party. So I think in our party favors research, which was from races from 2008 to 2015. So we looked at all nomination contests across the country from that time period. Only 17% of those races were competitive nomination races, meaning that more than one person ran for that nomination race. A large number of these contests were appointed. They weren't races at all. Somebody was hand selected. So if you were interested in running in that riding and the party already chose to appoint somebody else, you could be completely out of luck.
Yeah, and let's even get into there's also vetting, right? Like you can't just say, "Hey, I'm going to run," and that's that. I mean, you have to fill out a nomination package that could be 20 pages long, 50 pages long. They want to know everything. I've seen these documents. They even sometimes ask, have you ever been caught plagiarizing in university? I'm not kidding. They ask for your social media passwords. They ask for your entire life, basically. And can you imagine giving this over to strangers to apply for a job? It's kind of strange.
If that information means that the party chooses not to let you run as a candidate, we don't learn about this. a lot of time, a lot of work to collect the signatures to run, and you can be disallowed without having a clear sense of why that's the case.
Yeah. So, the party might find something in your history. Often it's social media. The way that I've seen things happen is if you want to be a candidate and they find something in your social media that was relatively recent that is objectionable, that's very different than finding something from your past. So if it is many years ago, the party can find a way to say, well, you've learned and you're not that person anymore. And, they can get a handle on it. But if you've said something pretty offensive in the last year or so, they can't use that argument anymore. And so the party doesn't want to be associated with somebody who has sort of odious views. And understandably, we wouldn't want that. On the other hand, if the legislature is supposed to represent the public, and the reality is a lot of people in the public sometimes have odious views, you have to question, should the political party be the one deciding, or should it be the public who's deciding? So it really raises all these questions about what we want our democracy to be like.
It really does. But I think the key question is not just the party's ability to make this decision, but also the public's ability to know that this decision has been made and why. And I think that's really a key factor in it.
Okay, so let's pretend that you actually you're deemed to have a clean record. You get a clean bill of health. You're approved. You can go forward to become the candidate. You now face a contested nomination or acclamation. Can you talk to me about that?
Sure. So the reality is that there aren't that many contested nominations. I mentioned earlier, only 17% of the races that we tracked from 2008 to 2015 were competitive. So that was more than one person running. I think this is important to consider when we consider that there's a lot of ridings where the conclusion of them is foregone. So they always go for a particular political party. Of course, there's always an element of change, but the most likelihood is that it will be a conservative riding, a liberal riding, an NDP riding, a Bloc riding. That there is very little chance they will go in a different party direction. If that person is acclaimed rather than there being a competitive race, functionally the people living in that riding have almost no say over who's representing them in the House of Commons. There is very little community input into the person that is going to represent them. And I think that is a concern. We want to have healthy nomination races because we want people to feel engaged in them. We want people to be engaged in their political parties. We want people to care about who's representing them. And if the likelihood is it's going to be one person who's already foregone, I think that really limits the likelihood of people becoming more politically engaged in their communities.
Yeah. So we've got all that to consider. And now let's say you end up winning a nomination race where members of the party end up voting for you and say, yes, you will be our candidate, or you're acclaimed because nobody else came forward. And so now you are the official candidate. That's that then, right? What happens next, generally speaking?
Sometimes people don't run, not because there's one person who's come forward and they feel that person's stronger. They also don't run because nomination races can be really short and they can be called at a very last minute. So people don't necessarily have the time, even if they're very engaged in their community, even if they're pondering having a run for the nomination contest, they may not have the time to really put up a fight, especially if they know that there's a strong candidate already there that they want to challenge. There's also some issues with financing when we have short nomination races. So if somebody knows ahead of time that a race is going to be called, they can spend money before the nomination race is called, and that doesn't fall under the financing rules. So having consistent and longer nomination contests could be a really crucial way to make it a little more equal.
Yeah.
To open up the nomination.
It also raises the question whether there's any role, or to what extent there's a role for elections agencies in all of this process. It's a whole other conversation. These are exactly the kind of things you can read about in Party Favours, how federal election candidates are chosen, the document that's available on the Samara Centre's website. I'd like to just turn it over now, Beatrice, to talking about the other article that I had mentioned, which is Member of Parliament, a job with no description. And just the title of that article alone says a lot, doesn't it? I mean, the politicians I've talked to over time, they just find it's amazing. They arrive in Ottawa or a provincial legislature and they just can't believe they're here, and really feels this sense of history and tradition and all the weight of the world. And they just feel so important and excited. And then you start realizing you don't know how the system works and you're trying to figure things out. And sometimes by the time you figure it out, you're into another election campaign. So maybe talk to me a little bit about the idea of Member of Parliament, a job with no description.
I also love the title because I think it is a real click for people when you hear it and think, how would you define the job description of an MP? And knowing that there's no consistency across members of Parliament themselves, that I think this opens up a lot of really crucial questions, partially because if we're thinking about it, if we don't have a job description, then can we know what the qualifications for an MP are? Can we know what the skills we want to see in the people that we're voting for? If we don't have a job description, what are we considering when we are choosing to vote for candidates? And I think there's a big can of worms that gets opened up there.
Yeah, I remember so vividly. I was interviewing a Liberal MP in Toronto, in fact. And I was talking about, why isn't there more clarity about the role of the job, especially when you're recruiting candidates, right? Like, so not just once why don't we have more training? Why don't we explain what's involved so that you don't just arrive and you're suddenly there in Ottawa or a capital city in a provincial legislature trying to figure out why isn't there training? And this Liberal MP said to me, it doesn't matter what party he was with, but he just said, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "We would never tell them that, because if we did, they wouldn't want to run." And it was a shocking comment to realize, like, wow, if we actually expose the warts of democracy, maybe people wouldn't want to be election candidates.
Well, this was something we heard at the Samara Centre quite a bit when we made a podcast, Humans of the House, because people were worried that being so forthcoming about those warts, about the challenges of the job, would actually be cool people on wanting to ever run for office, whether municipal, provincial, or federal, that it would scare them off. But I think being honest about the challenges is the only way to move forward and finding solutions to them.
Yeah, and that starts by talking about things, and that's why the Samara Centre for Democracy is, to me, a pivotal resource in a lot of the work that I do, because what it does is it really, the research publications, the podcasts, and others shines a light on things that otherwise we wouldn't hear about. So I certainly encourage people to pick up that publicly available resource, Member of Parliament, a job with no description, and give some thought as to why it is that there is no job description, and why it is that our poor elected officials have to figure it out for themselves a lot of the time. So that's a summary of those particular readings. Beatrice, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me.